Good evening. I'm Howard Wolvington, Dean-elect of the Seattle chapter of the American Guild of Organists. With our program committee, I'm responsible for putting together the programs for our membership for this calendar year 2021 through 2022. Our first meeting of the year is this virtual presentation which features the work of the Pipe Organ Foundation. The Foundation is an important organization with close ties to the Seattle chapter. Our primary presenter, Dr. Carl Dodrell, happened to be also the Dean of the Seattle chapter from 2015 to 2016. He's going to explain the work of the Foundation, and then we're going to see some examples of organs that have been worked on or are being worked on by the Foundation, one in his shop and two that have been installed locally. After the presentation, we will have a Zoom session and an opportunity to discuss the work of the Foundation as well as to get together. I hope you can join us for that Zoom session.
I'm Carl Dodrell, and I'm president of the Pipe Organ Foundation. Our program has its main objective to give you information about the Pipe Organ Foundation, especially information that would be of interest to people in the AGO. Our Pipe Organ Foundation started in the year 2000, and its primary objective is to save pipe organs that are being discarded and to make them available after rebuilding them in public situations where people want them but cannot afford them. We are now in front of our shop facility on Mercer Island, and I want to tell you and show you around just a little bit about it. First, let me say another word or two about the foundation. Our foundation is a 501c3 public charity, and we have a board of directors, of which most of the people on the board are members of AGO, I'm very pleased to say. Furthermore, our Pipe Organ Foundation heavily uses volunteers, and you'll have some pictures now that you can see our volunteers at work doing all sorts of different tasks for the foundation. The purpose of the foundation is to save pipe organs, to rebuild them and make them available for public settings where people want them but can't otherwise afford them, and our volunteers help this to be the case. No one, in fact, is on a salary at all. Not only do we do work in the Pacific Northwest area, but we also provide pipe organs for elsewhere in the world. And this past January, we sent 2 pipe organs, which we pulled out of churches here that were being discarded. The organs were being discarded, and we sent them to the Philippines. And as you look at some of the pictures here, you can see actually in our own driveway situation, we were able to pack a 40-foot container and send it to the Philippines with 2 organs and save them. And one of those organs is already playing over there. We had previously sent another organ to the Philippines, which is now an organ in a cathedral there. And in addition, we had sent an organ to China. Now, what we have here is our Pipe Organ Foundation shop. And as you look, you can see on the left side, we have a building which is really the assembly room. And you will see and hear our current project there. But right in the middle is our major garage. And it has the shop, which has all the heavy tools in it. And then on top up here, we have the console shop. And so we have space for a number of workers. I should point out that, in fact, we continued to work during COVID, but we did work with masks, and we cut our crews in half, and so that they could work a number of people feet apart. But we kept on working, and we're continuing to work to the present time. Now, let's go in and take a look at the big shop. Okay, this is our heavy workshop. And if you look at some of the tools we have over here, you'll see that we have saws, we have a drill press, we have other kinds of power tools that are set up here to do major woodwork and other kinds of construction work. You'll also notice, obviously, we have a trumpet sitting here. And as it turns out, this trumpet was obtained through Carl Rabel, who is our newsletter editor, because he was organist at a church in Everett that the church was going to close, and a lot of pipes were available, and he got us up there, and we got the trumpet out. And it's a very fine Stinkins type trumpet. We're very pleased with it, and it's going to go into the organ that you're going to hear in just a few minutes, which is our current project. Now, beyond that, you will see as you look around the room that we have a number of boxes here. Actually, there are about 150 boxes on the walls, and they contain pipe organ parts. All sorts of parts, whether it's springs, magnets, valves, pieces of leather, other kinds of things. And so we're very pleased. You just have to have a huge number of things on reserve if you're going to do the work, and especially if you're going to do it in a very economical way. You will also notice towards the ceiling and around that we have wood. And if you were to look really closely at the wood that's all over the place, you'll find that there's a number on every piece of wood, and that's the number of inches that the piece of wood is long. And we have several hundred pieces, and basically we scavenge good wood in organs when the organs are given to us, and then we save it and we make it available and use it. And when we cut off a piece of wood, we right away get the piece that we don't need and mark on it how many inches it is and put it back up so that it's very much in reserve for continued use. So we're very green in our work, very economical as best that we can be. Okay, so this is our major shop here, and we're now ready to go into the assembly room, which is where the organ is that we are currently working on. I should point out that this is an organ for Faith Lutheran Church in Lake City on the north side of Seattle, and it will have 21 ranks in the organ altogether. It's a 3-manual instrument. You'll see the console in just a moment. And the pipes that you're going to see in the room are 12 of the 21 ranks. And all of these pipes are playing, and our board member and AGO member, Roger Mears, is going to play them for you. But let's go into the room and see what's there. This is the console that we will be using for the project at Faith Lutheran. The console was obtained from the First Church of Christ Scientist in Seattle. It was installed there in 1959, and it replaced the original Austin console, which was installed with the original organ there in 1911. Now, all of the wiring on this console had to be stripped out and new wiring installed. And Roger, who you will see here in a moment, did this guided by Chuck Huffington, who is on our board and who is an electronics expert. Here you get a view of the back side of the console and get some idea of all the wiring work that had to be done. And in the tall box, we have the Syndine operating system, and it had to have hundreds and hundreds of wires, and that wiring was done almost entirely by volunteers. This whole thing will drive the pipe organ very economically, and it will use one of the most up-to-date electronic systems that's available, namely from the Syndine Corporation in Vancouver, Washington. We are very pleased with this system. Now we will give a sample of just a few of the ranks in this room which are playing. The first of these is a solitional, which gives a typical sound like this. When you add the Vox Celeste to it, you get this sound. Now, that's perfectly fine for an organ of this size of 21 ranks for strings. But we also had at hand 2 additional ranks which Byrd Fritz, the father of Paul Fritz, had. And these were the handmade viola pomposa and viola pomposa celeste ranks. The viola pomposa has a bigger sound, and it sounds like this. When you add the celeste to it, the sound you get is this. And if you play all four ranks together, you get this sound. Now, in terms of reeds, we have a Durst oboe, which goes all the way down to the bottom of the 16-foot with a fagot. And the bottom note sounds like this. And then right here on the front row, we have a clarinet. This is an interesting clarinet because it is a free reed rank, not the typical striking reed rank. And it was made by Aeolian about 100 years ago and put into an Aeolian resonance organ in Florida. It has a very much clarinet sound like this. Our first piece that Roger's going to play today is a canon and the 12 organ trio by Martinson. finishes our demonstration here at the shop, and now we're off to our first church, Mercer Island Presbyterian Church. Okay, we are now at Mercer Island Presbyterian Church, and for our pipe organ foundation, this was our opus number 2, which was installed in 2005. Clint Meadway, a long-term member of AGO, was centrally involved in planning the tonal structure of this organ with significant help from Jim Stetner. We set the organ up in this way. At the front, you will see the grate and part of the pedal division, and in the middle, there is the swell division, which is in the box behind the middle. But we wanted to do more than that from the very start. We wanted to provide a surround sound situation for the people in the pews. And so it was never intended to have this organ just at the front, but rather to have a surround sound situation. So now let's go around the sanctuary and look at what's there. To the right, as we go around the sanctuary, we find a 16-foot open wood. This is a rank of pipes that was in First Church of Christ Scientist in Seattle. So it was an Austin rank from 1911. And putting it over the side works very well, as the sound gives a tremendous feeling across the entire congregation. So we like it a great deal. At the back, we have an antiphonal organ. And this antiphonal organ was installed at the beginning in 2005, and it has 4 basic ranks, of which 1 is a principal, 1 is a flute, 1 is a string, and 1 is a reed. We have found this organ to be very useful, and it moves the sound around greatly, and it is our favorite way of installing an organ, is to have part of the organ at the back or the front of the church, and the major part at the other part of the church. But even more than this, we went on and we have more sounds as we go around further to the right. Moving on from the antiphonal organ, as we go around the sanctuary, we find some interesting parts of the organ at the next 90 degrees. And the major part that you see here is an Aeolian harp, a 49-note harp that was in an Aeolian residence almost exactly 100 years ago. And behind this is the glass flute that we will be demonstrating here in a few minutes. As you already know, the primary work done by our foundation is done by volunteers. And as you might guess, just from looking around this sanctuary, a great deal of work was involved. As a matter of fact, in the initial installation in 2005, 5,800 volunteer hours were contributed by a total of 52 people. Many of these people were from this church. And this was important because it became their organ. It was in their church, and they had ownership and understanding that typically the people in the pews don't have unless they actually get their hands on the instrument. Not only were there 52 people involved, but 14 of them contributed 100 hours or more. And because of that, we got shirts made for them, which looked like this. And the shirts were given to them in a special ceremony that was offered for these individuals who had contributed so heavily for this church work. So this is really a plus and a distinctive feature of our foundation to get people in the church involved. Now we're going to demonstrate just 2 of the ranks in the organ. There are actually 28 voices, but we'll just show you 2 of them. The first of these is a 16-foot reed that was in St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Seattle before the Father Willis organ was installed there. And it was installed in that church in 1928 by the Wanger and Company, and was obtained by the vice president of our foundation for many years, West Spore. Ultimately, it's wound up here, and the bass notes of the tromba or trombone sound like this. Quite on the contrary, we have a second voice to show you. And a question we addressed is this: have all the voices for pipe organs that can be invented, have they been invented already? Or are there some more sounds that could be invented? And we concluded that the latter was true. And as you may know, if you blow across the top of a bottle, you'll make a sound. And we wondered, could in fact you make an organ sound out of this that would be compatible with the other voices in a regular pipe organ? And the answer is yes, you can. So in the picture you're now being shown, you will see what is called the glass flute in the present organ, and you're going to be able to hear it in a minute. Now, as you look at that picture, you will see that the bottles are filled to varying degrees with oil. The oil does not evaporate, so it can stay there, and the tuning can remain very constant for long periods of time. In this glass flute, we have a total of 56 notes. It plays at 8 feet and at 4 feet, and there are 10 sizes of bottles. They go from a half gallon to 1/16 of an ounce, which is 1/1000th of the volume of a half gallon. And right here is an example of a bottle which is 1/16 of an ounce. Okay, it is just over an inch tall, and in fact we have an octave worth of these bottles at the very top of the glass flute, and if I happen to be able to blow it correctly, you would see that it would sound something like this. But better to do is to have Eric demonstrate for us what the glass flute sounds like. You can see that it's a very different sound than any other sound that you've heard of in a pipe organ. We are now going to have Eric Johnson demonstrate for us various combinations of ranks in this pipe organ. He's going to play a half dozen pieces or just segments of those pieces to make those demonstrations. So this is Eric Johnson, who's now playing and who's been a member of AGO for more than 40 years. So we're very pleased to have him do the demonstration today. We are now at Covenant Presbyterian Church in Issaquah. This is where our Pipe Organ Foundation installed its opus number 1 in what is now the chapel. In the year 2005, the church built a new building, and as you look around, you can see the scope of the sanctuary, which was much larger than the chapel. We moved over the organ we had put in the chapel, which was the Sandy Balcom 2-manual 8-rank organ, his home organ, and that organ was also at University Temple United Methodist Church before the Bosch organ was installed there. We brought it over here when the new building was made. With the new and larger building, an enlargement of the organ also needed to be done. And this was completed in 2010 for the front organ, which you can see at the front of the sanctuary. This included 16 ranks of pipes, which were divided into great, swell, and pedal divisions. And this became our opus number 6. In 2011, the antiphonal division was added, and it consisted of 4 ranks: an 8-foot violin diapason, a 8-foot melodia, a 16-foot violone, and a 4-foot cornopian. These 4 ranks were deliberately selected as they represented the 4 basic types of organ pipes, namely principals, flutes, strings, and reeds. This antiphonal was very successful at Mercer Island Presbyterian, and so it was used here. Each rank plays at multiple pitches to give as much versatility as possible. As always, the pipes came from various sources. In the back wall, you can see up there high, the 16-foot wooden violone, and it came from First Church of Christ Scientist in Seattle, so it is Austin, 1911. The cornopian, which is hidden, was made by organ builder Pierce, likely in the early 1890s. So it is about 130 years old, and we will be demonstrating it later on in comparison with the trumpet at the front. The value of an antiphonal division is huge, both because it bathes the people in sound and because it gives the organist huge flexibility with the sound in terms of moving it around. And we will demonstrate some of this later. I have always been interested in knowing how the various pipe sounds impact people. Perhaps this is because I was a psychologist for more than 40 years. At any rate, I was interested in how they affect people, how people respond to the various sounds. And I observed fairly early on that principals and flutes are, when they're played well, are viewed very nicely as precise, concise, and able to present the basic sounds clearly. However, I also found that people rarely cry or respond emotionally to those ranks. Instead, it's the reeds and the strings to which people tend to respond emotionally. The reeds, for example, have color that are involved with them, and the strings have texture that's involved. And when you hear these kinds of sounds, there's likely to be more of an emotional impact. And thus, by choosing your stops, you can have at least some impact on how people are responding. Of course, we need to have all 4 kinds of pipes in a pipe organ to get a full range of response. And it's important not to minimize the color stops, the reeds, and the strings in the construction of an organ, or else the full impact of it will not be appreciated. In front of you, in the middle, is the swell box in this organ. And this swell box has 4 reeds in it: an oboe, a clarinet, a trumpet, and a vox humana. Furthermore, at the back, as was already mentioned, there's a cornopian. So there's a number of reed sounds here. With regard to strings, at the front, there's the usual solitional and celeste, but in the back is the 16-foot violon, which is also playable as a viol at 8 foot and at 4 foot. When you listen to these sounds, you will hear the benefits of having not only those at the front and at the back, but also the difference in the impacts of the sounds I hope you will appreciate. This organ is driven by a Reasoner 3-manual console that was in a home in Oregon for many years. On the left side, beyond the keyboards, you can see a MIDI recording device which operates with this Syndine system so that you can play anything that you want and then play it back, stepping out into the congregation and hearing what it's going to sound like with the particular stops that you have. This we have found to be especially effective in assisting organists to view how their playing is being heard by the congregation. I want now to turn this session over to Beverly Recker, who is one of our AGO members, and who is going to say a little bit about the organ and then demonstrate it for us.
I will be comparing various voices in each division of the organ. I will be playing just excerpts from different pieces. The first one is Holy, Holy, Holy. Just play portions of the hymn. I will introduce it on the grate and then have full sound with the antiphonal, which gives you a surround sound. The surround sound of the organ says to the congregation, okay, it's time to sing, and it also says, I'm here to help you, to aid you to worship. I will then go to the antiphonal, and it helps the worshipers in saying, okay, you've got this, you can sing out louder, it's your turn now. And we do notice that when the congregation is singing. And I will also use the antiphonal in other pieces to show contrast between the grate and the antiphonal. I use that when the swell is just too soft.
That completes our program for today. Many thanks to Roger, Eric, and Beverly, who did the playing for us, and to Howard, who made all of this possible. I hope that this gives you a good understanding about the Pipe Organ Foundation and that you will see it as a real asset for AGO and other organ groups in the Pacific Northwest. Have a good day.